I I've this is travel in Asia, but I've only been to Japan myself. And so I did ask other members of the group if they had any travel experiences they want to talk about. So other people may join in, and as we go, please feel free. Um, I just wanted to tell you how this all started. Uh, I was I was born in Japan. My mom's a Japanese person, or was Japanese, and we moved to the United States when I was like 2 years old. So I don't really remember anything about it. But my grandma lived there, and my friend that I worked with for many years in the library at UCSD was a Japanese woman born and raised in Japan, and she said one day, I'd like to go to Japan again. Do you want to go with me? And I can show you around and we can go see your mom's town and everything. And that sounded like so much fun. So um, I said, sure. What time of year do you want to go? So then we were trying to figure it out. And I kind of thought fall would be pretty, and I know it would be, but she said that she wanted to see the cherry blossoms again. And so that's when we decided to go in the springtime to see the cherry blossoms. So we went in 2019, and we did a combination of a guided tour with a group and a personal tour. The guided tour part of it was an international group. It was run by an American company, but the the people who were participants came from all over the United States, but they originally came from other countries. So we were the Japanese people, but they had people from India and Thailand and Great Britain. And so it was really fun kind of having an international group kind of on this tour together. Our first stop was in Tokyo, and we stayed at this hotel, a brand new hotel built on a brand new island that was built for the Tokyo Olympics that was held in 2021, I think it was. It got postponed because of COVID. But I just wanted you to see this bridge, this rainbow bridge, because it's all lit up by lights that are run by solar power. And it's only a bridge for, I think, commuters, but the train goes on it. It's not for cars. So we can move on. Or do I move on?
No, Christy Lynn, if you can advance the slide, please.
And right outside our hotel was this big guy guarding us. We had to see him every day, so Japanese stereotype. But okay, moving on. And this is the Tokyo Skytree. I'm not thrilled by that or anything, but they made a really big deal of it on the tour because it's the second largest structure in the world. It was the first for a tiny bit, but now it's a structure in Dubai that's the tallest structure. Okay. And this is what we were in search of, is the cherry blossoms. But Tokyo is very far north in Japan, and we were there in March, and it was still pretty cold. So not a lot was blooming. We found a few, but this was cherry, and a lot of plum was blossoming at the time. And we had to go to the Imperial Palace to find this one. So let's move on. I want to tell you a car story. I was blown away. When you are in Japan, there are no junker cars anywhere. They're all new cars. Work trucks, everybody drives new cars. And so I was asking around about it because I thought, this is weird. It turns out they have this law where when you purchase a car, you put down a substantial deposit, and you forfeit the deposit if you don't relinquish that car within 7 years. So nobody drives old cars there. It's weird. Also, another thing that's very different from our culture, there's no public trash cans and there's no trash blowing in the streets. People don't eat in public. They don't drop trash in public. It's all extremely clean. It's very different from how things can be here. Okay. We can go on to the next slide, please. And this is, I think it's one of the gates as we got near our shrine and we found another cherry tree. And we can move on. There are temples and shrines everywhere in Japan. This little shrine happens to be between two houses. When we were walking down the street, we just found it. And it's kind of interesting. And then if we go to the next slide, this is a temple, and all the temples are very noticeably marked because they have these gates in the front called torii gates. They're two tall pillars and one or two crossbars at the top, and they let you know that you're entering a sacred place. So they're pretty unmistakable, and some of them are very, very ornate. Okay, let's move on. This is one of the most visited places because it's got these huge torii gates, but it also has giant paper lanterns, and so people love to get their photos there. And see, this young woman's wearing a mask. That's before COVID. It's the Japanese have always worn masks. If you're not feeling well or whatever, you cover so you don't transmit illness. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, there's me. And this is Shibuya. It's just a neighborhood within Tokyo, but it's where the Scrumble Crossing is. And what that is one of the first stop light areas where all the cars are stopped at one point and the pedestrians just run wild all through the street. They can go any direction they want at the crossing. But the special story here is this dog. His name is Hachiko. And for the first 2 years of his life, he walked his owner from home to the train station every day and then would go home. At the end of the day, he'd go back to the train station all by himself and wait for his owner to go home. And he did that for 2.5 years. And then his owner died suddenly one day at work. And so he didn't come home from work. That dog continued to do that walk every day for 9 years. So faithful. So he's like a legend in Japan. Okay, next slide. We went to the open air museum. They call it the Picasso Museum, but the Picasso stuff is all indoors, not outdoors. But anyways, somebody has work there. If we move to the next slide, you'll see a piece you recognize as being an artist, Nikki de Saint Phal. And this is most of Japan's somewhat volcanic, but if you move to the next slide, they have a lot of volcanic springs and hot springs, and so they've built this trench through this pretty art park, and they bring towels to you, and you can sit on the side and soak your feet, and it's kind of fun. Okay, next slide. Another thing we did was we rode a tram down to try to see Mount Fuji. So when we were in the airway over the valley before Mount Fuji, we were looking out, and this yellow looks like clouds. It's not. It's patches of yellow sulfur on the ground. Next slide. And then when you actually get to the observatory area, they warn you, don't go outside, don't breathe. Okay, next slide. But I had to show you how windy it is because I just thought it was an incredible place to be. I held my breath. Next slide. The next shrine we went to, my friend got really sick right when we first arrived in Japan. She got a really bad cold, and so she was asleep on the bus, but we went to another shrine, and it's like 100 steps, and I climbed them. I couldn't believe I did it. This is at the top, at the shrine itself, people write their prayers and tie them to these little ropes that are hanging across the front. Next slide. And then we were heading south, and we went to as well, onsen means hot spring in Japanese. But we went to a ryokan, a traditional Japanese inn, which is where you sit on the floor, you sleep on the floor. It's very old fashioned, and it's very nice. Um, this was a more modern hotel that they were sort of faking it, but the you can't see it well in this picture, but hot water from the volcanic activity nearby is bubbling up through this water, so it looks like the ocean is boiling here. Next slide. And there's our futon that we slept on. Next slide. And then we visited the Golden Pavilion. First, a government worker owned it, and then a shogun owned it. But it's like one of those UN World Heritage sites. It's amazing. Next slide. Finally, we made it to Kyoto, and we're further south, and you see there's more cherry blossoms. Next slide. So Kyoto was the first site of the royal palaces. And this is this crowded little shopping street, and there's just a bazillion people on it, and cherry trees overhanging. It's really pretty. Next slide. I went to a tea ceremony, and so we were all the foreigners learning about the tea ceremony. And if you go to the next slide, the two girls that were teaching us about it were so cute. This one, in the white kimono, had been to California, and she wanted more than anything to learn how to surf. So we invited her to come back. Next slide. Then, this is not my kind of thing, but I was forced to ride a rickshaw. It was one of the things that everyone said you have to do, and it was part of the tour that we were on. And it was through a bamboo forest. So they said the only way to go through the bamboo forest, you can't walk, you have to go on that. So I did it. Next slide. But the really cool thing was, because see how awful one poor guy has to drag you around. But the really cool thing was his mother was born in the same city I was born in. So it's a small world. Okay, next slide. And there's the bamboo forest. Okay, so then this is Fushimi Inari Shrine. There's like thousands of these bright orange gates that are so close together, like only a foot apart, that lead up to the entrance of the shrine. And Fushimi is the city. Inari means fox in Japanese, and it's because of the shape of those gates that they named it Inari Shrine. Okay, next slide. Oh,
You might have to exit and then go back. Just there's a lot more slides.
and I found, when we went to go to a temple and see all these gigantic Buddhas, like the biggest in the world and all this stuff. Well, we found some pretty good blooming cherry trees, but we also found, if you go to the next slide, what are these sumo wrestlers? These were sumos in training, so they're not like totally biggest yet, but they're pretty good size. And they're really cute because everybody wanted to get their picture with these guys. Okay, next one. And then we went to Nara Deer Park, which is part of a preserve and a shrine But those deer are so tame. They come right up to you and nuzzle your hands because they're looking for cookies. They sell cookies outside the park and you can come in and you're allowed to feed them. Okay, next slide. And then we've sort of reached the end of our group tour, and my friend and I moved on because she wanted to take me to Nagasaki, which is my mom's hometown. And so here we are in front of the peace statue. Next slide. And this is the hypocenter of where the bomb dropped, 500 meters above this black obelisk. There was a long period of time where all of Japan was closed to foreigners. There was just Nagasaki that was open as a seaport and only open to certain select groups. Like first it was the Dutch and the Portuguese and the Chinese. This is a Chinese church, but because it was Christian, they had to sort of lay low. And so they tried to make their church not look Christian by making it turtle shaped. I know, I think that's really cute. Oh, and this is Puccini. He wrote, as you may know, the opera Madama Butterfly. And he's a kind of a big thing, even though he never went to Japan and never lived there. They've got his statue there. Okay, next. And there she is. Next. This far south, Nagasaki is in the very south of Japan. There were a lot of cherry blossoms, and everywhere we went, we found them. Next slide. And Nagasaki is an extremely hilly town. That partially explains why the death toll and damage was so different in Nagasaki than Hiroshima. Hiroshima is completely flat area, and Nagasaki is very hilly. In fact, one interesting thing is really fun. Nagasaki has elevators, escalators, and funiculars all over town. So outdoors, so that people can get around town without having to trot up a bunch of stairs. So next slide, please. And finally, we never saw Mount Fuji when we went to see her, but flying home to Tokyo, we found her. So that was our big trip.